All right, welcome everybody. We are starting today with Shrimad Bhagavata Mahapurana, Book 10, Discourse 70, which is entitled, it's kind of a two-part, two subjects in the same discourse, Sri Krishna's daily routine, or at least his morning routine, and kings taken captive by Jarasandha send their messenger to Sri Krishna. Sri Sukha began again. As the dawn approached, Sri Krishna's wives, each sleeping with the arms of her husband about her neck, would reproach the cocks that crowed for fear of being separated from him. Roused from sleep by the breeze blowing through the Mandara grove in the midst of humming bees, birds sang loudly like bards, as if in order to wake up Sri Krishna. Clasped between his arms, Rukmini would not welcome this sacred hour for fear of being torn away from his embrace. Waking up about 2 hours and a half before sunrise. And that's a little bit less than our 2 hours and a half. It's 2 muhurts and a half, and their hours are 48 minutes instead of 60. Sri Krishna would first wash his hands and feet and rinse his mouth, and with a serene mind meditate on the self, beyond Prakriti, that is one without a second, self-luminous and indestructible, which is by virtue of its own nature eternally free from the taint of avidya, which goes by the name of Brahman, whose existence and blissful nature are indicated by his own potencies that are responsible for the appearance and destruction of the universe. After this, Sri Krishna, the foremost among the righteous, would take a plunge bath in pure water, put on 2 clean pieces of cloth, perform according to the injunctions of the scriptures, sandhya and other rites, and having poured oblations into the sacred fire, would silently repeat the sacred Gayatri mantra. He would stand before the rising sun and offer prayers to the sun god and handfuls of water to the gods, rishis, and pitris, all of whom were his own rays. Then, having worshipped the elders of his family, as well as brahmanas, with due ceremony, the vigilant Lord would give away from day to day to well-adorned brahmanas, together with silk clothes, deerskin, and sesamum seeds, 13,084 fresh-calved and beautifully caparisoned cows, docile by nature, yielding abundant milk and accompanied with their calf, with their horns plated with gold and hoofs with silver, and with their necks decked with pearl necklaces. He would then salute cows, brahmanas, gods, elders, gurus, and all created beings, who were but manifestations of his own self, and would duly touch auspicious things. He would then adorn himself, the one ornament of the human world, with clothes and ornaments peculiarly his own, as well as with excellent garlands and pigments. Looking into liquid ghee and a mirror, he would first have a look at the cows and bulls, brahmanas, and images of gods. These are auspicious things to look at. And so Dvijas traditionally start the day by looking at some of those things, some or all of those things. Thereafter, he would take delight in causing boons to be conferred on all classes of people dwelling in the city and in the gymnasium, and gratifying his other subjects by granting their desires. Presenting the brahmanas first, then his friends and relations, then his ministers and counselors, and then his consorts, with garlands, betel leaves, and pigments, he would last of all accept them for himself. By that time, his charioteer Daruka would bring his most wonderful chariot drawn by Sugriva and other horses, and saluting the Lord would stand before him. Holding the charioteer's hands in his own hand, Sri Krishna would then mount the chariot, accompanied by Satyaki and Uddhava, his 2 best friends, even as the sun ascends the eastern hills. Watched with bashful and affectionate glances by the ladies of the gymnasium and reluctantly permitted by them to go, the Lord would smile at them, and thus captivating their heart, would sally forth to the council hall. Parikshit, surrounded by all the Yadus, Sri Krishna would enter the hall bearing the name of Sudharma, the inmates of which would not experience, while in the hall, the 6 waves of existence, hunger and thirst, grief and delusion, old age and death. Seated on an exalted throne, illuminating the quarters with his own splendor and surrounded by the lions of Yadu's race, the Almighty Lord, the foremost of the Yadus, shone like the moon in the midst of hosts of stars in the heavens. There the jesters would entertain the Lord with amusements of various kinds, and master dancers and dancing girls severally with their dances. Sutas, Magadhas, and Vandis would dance, sing, and panegyrize the Lord, an accompaniment to clay tom-toms, lutes, tambourines, flutes, cymbals, and conches. Seated there, certain Brahmanas skilled in exposition would expound Vedic mantras, while others would narrate the stories of ancient kings of sacred renown. One day, O Raja, a certain person never seen before made his appearance there. He was announced to the Lord by the porters on duty and ushered into his presence. The man bowed to Sri Krishna, the Supreme Lord, with joined palms and communicated to him the suffering of certain kings caused by their incarceration at the hands of Jarasandha. "20,000 and odd kings who did not, these are obviously like local village chiefs and so on, who often do still have the title of Raja, who did not pay homage to him during his expeditions for the conquest of the quarters, had been forcibly detained by him at his capital city of Girivraja, the modern Giridih. And the messenger conveyed their message, which ran as follows: O Krishna, the embodiment of truth, knowledge, and bliss, Satchidanandam, whose personality is immeasurable and who destroy the fear of those who have taken refuge in you. We who are possessed of a differential outlook and are afraid of birth and death resort to you for protection. The generality of people on earth are intensely addicted to prohibited acts or those actuated by self-interest and are indifferent to your worship, which is the only auspicious act enjoined on them by you. In the form of all-powerful and ever-vigilant time, in the meantime, you suddenly uproot their hope of life. We bow to you. You are the Lord of the universe, who have appeared on earth with your part manifestation for protecting the virtuous and chastising the wicked. O Lord, we are at a loss to understand how anyone other than you can transgress your command. Nor do we understand how men who have taken refuge in you can reap the fruit of their past actions. O Lord, the joy of rulership is dependent on others and is as unreal as a dream. It is with this body, which is virtually dead and is subject to constant fear, that we bear burdens, having abandoned the joy existing in the self and obtained from you by disinterested people. Foolish as we are suffering in this world due to your Maya. O Lord, your feet remove the grief of those who fall at them. Therefore, kindly release us who are bound with the rope of karma in the form of this Jarasandha. Possessing the strength of 10,000 elephants himself, he has imprisoned us kings in his palace, even as the lion would round up sheep. O wielder of the chakra, you fought Jarasandha 18 times, vanquishing him in all those battles except one. We know that your power and strength are unlimited, and yet, behaving as you did like a human being, you allowed yourself to be defeated by him once. This has aggravated his insolence. He now persecutes us, knowing us to be your servants. O invincible Lord, now do whatever you deem fit under the circumstances. The messenger said, with words, these kings imprisoned by Jarasandha have sought shelter under your feet, eager to see you. May those helpless kings be blessed. Sri Shuka resumed. When the messenger of the kings was thus delivering the message, the celestial sage Narada appeared on the scene, wearing a mass of golden matted locks. So evidently his hair is gold, or at least right now it's gold, and dazzling like the sun. Seeing the sage, the almighty Sri Krishna, the suzerain lord of all the worlds, rose from his seat with his counselors and attendants and joyfully bowed to the Devarishi with his head bent low. The Devarishi having taken his seat, the Lord worshipped him with due honor, and bringing delight to the sage with his reverence, spoke to him in the following sweet words. O sage, are all the three worlds now free from fear? Your constantly going about the three worlds surely constitutes a great gain to us. Nothing in the worlds of God's creation is unknown to you. We therefore inquire of you what the Pandavas and others intend to do at present. Sri Narada replied, O all-pervading infinite Lord, you are such a great magician that even conjurers like Brahma, the creator of the world, are unable to penetrate your Maya. Lord, you abide in all created beings by virtue of your potencies, even as fire remains latent in every log of wood. I have witnessed your Maya more than once, Hence your inquiry about the Pandavas does not appear to me as something out of the common. You bring forth and destroy this universe by your own Maya, and by your Maya it appears as existent. Who can know your intentions full well? You are inconceivable by nature. My salutation be to you. The soul moves on the whirligig of birth and death and knows not the way to deliverance from this sheath, the source of evil. Descending on earth in so many forms by way of Leela, you kindle the lamp of your glory. Lord, I resort to you for protection. The Supreme Spirit as you are, you nevertheless imitate the ways of the human world. Therefore, I shall communicate to you what your cousin and loving devotee, Raja Yudhishthira, intends to do. The Pandava Raja enjoys on this very earth all the enjoyments of the abode of Brahma, the highest paradise. He is desireless, and yet he would worship you through the supreme yajna known as Raja Suya. May you be pleased to give your consent to his proposal. Eager to see you, the gods, rishis, and illustrious rajas too will assemble in that grand yajna. Lord, you are an embodiment of the Supreme Spirit. Even the lowborn are hallowed by hearing of your glories, singing your praises, and contemplating on your virtues, to say nothing of those who see and touch your person. Lord, whose very presence on this earth constitutes a blessing for the three worlds, your spotless glory envelops all the quarters and is diffused on earth, in heaven, as well as in the subterranean regions, the patalas. Even as the waters washing your feet hallow the universe under the name of Mandakini in Svarga, Bhagavati in Patala, and the Ganga on earth. Sri Shuka went on. The clansmen of Sri Krishna assembled there, seized as they were with the desire to conquer Jarasandha, did not receive with approbation the words of the sage. Sri Krishna smilingly spoke to his devotee Uddhava in sweet words. The glorious Lord said, Uddhava, you are our disinterested friend and know the secret, meaning like disinterested, like has an impartial perspective and can see without bias, and know the secret of what should be decided upon through deliberation. Indeed, you are our supreme eye. Now tell us what should be done under the circumstances. We rely on you and shall act upon your advice. Questioned thus by the master, who though omniscient was behaving like an ignorant man, Uddhava received his command with his head bent low and replied. Thus ends the 70th discourse bearing on the deliberations about the Lord's departure in the latter half of Book 10 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 71, Sri Krishna goes to Indraprastha. Sri Shuka began again. Hearing these words, Uddhava, who was possessed of great wisdom, considered the statement of the celestial sage Narada and the opinion of the counselors as well as of Sri Krishna, and spoke thus. Lord, as recommended by the Devarishi, you should help your cousin who intends to perform the Raja Suya Yajna, and should also protect those who seek your protection. A Raja Suya Yajna is capable of being performed, O Almighty Lord, only by one who has conquered all the quarters. I am therefore driven to the conclusion that both these objects can be gained by the overthrow of Jarasandha. Indeed, great will be our advantage, O protector of cows, if we simply succeed in accomplishing this, and your restoring the imprisoned kings to freedom will bring glory to you. Possessing the strength of 10,000 elephants, Raja Jarasandha is, as a matter of fact, not very easy to resist, even for giants, other than Bhima, who is his equal in strength. He should, however, be vanquished in a duel and not otherwise, for he has an army consisting of 100 Akshalhinis. He is a devotee of the Brahmanas and never spurns the request of Brahmanas. Let Bhima approach him in the guise of a Brahmana and ask of him the boon of a single combat. In your presence, he will no doubt succeed in killing him in a duel. Lord, you are the almighty formless time. The creation and destruction of the universe take place through your power. Brahma and Shankara are mere instruments. The consorts of the kings would sing in their homes of your glorious act of destroying their common enemy and bringing about the release of their husbands, even as the gopis sing of your having delivered them. The sages who have taken refuge in you celebrate the rescue of Gajendra and of Sita, the daughter of Raja Janaka, and we sing of your having released your parents from Kansa's captivity. Thus, O Krishna, the destruction of Jarasandha will serve many a great purpose. As the merits of the imprisoned kings and the sins of Jarasandha are going to bear fruit thereby, The performance of the Rajasuya Yajna is in a large measure liked by you also. Sri Shuka went on. Parikshit, the aforesaid council of Uddhava was faultless and good in every respect. The Devarishi, the elderly Yadavas, and Sri Krishna too approved of it. Now, with the approval of elders, Vasudeva and others, the Almighty Lord Sri Krishna, son of Devaki, ordered his servants, Daruka, Jaitra, and others, to prepare for the journey. With the permission of Ugrasena and Balarama, a destroyer of foes, the Lord sent his consorts and sons with the retinue and luggage train in advance, and mounted his own chariot brought by Daruka and distinguished by its banner bearing the device of Garuda. He set out with his formidable army, consisting of chariots, elephants, cavalry, and footmen, and led by its numerous generals, filling the quarters with the tumultuous sound produced by clay tom-toms, kettle drums, tabors, conches, and trumpets. Clad in the best attire and adorned with ornaments, sandal paste and garlands, and strongly guarded with men armed with sword and shield, devoted consorts of the Lord with their children followed their husband, the immortal Lord, in litters, chariots drawn by horses, and gold palanquins. Then followed the trains of servants, wives, and courtesans, all richly adorned, with portable shelters of mats, woolen blankets and clothes, and other appurtenances secured on all sides on oxen, buffaloes, donkeys, and mules, and themselves journeying in carts or litters, or on the back of camels and elephants. That huge army, full of tumultuous noises, shone during the daytime with its lofty flags, umbrellas, chowries, excellent weapons, ornaments, crowns, and armors under the rays of the sun, like the sea with its agitated waves and whales. The sage Narada was delighted at heart at the sight of Sri Krishna, the bestower of liberation. Honored by the Lord of the Yadus and hearing his decision, the sage bowed to him. The Lord offered him worship at the time of his departure, and the sage left Dwaraka by air, treasuring the Lord's form in his heart. Then, turning to the messenger of the imprisoned kings, Bhagavan Sri Krishna spoke to him in pleasing words. Messenger, go and tell the kings that they should fear no more. Causing the death of Jarasandha, I shall bring them freedom soon. Thus commanded by the Lord, the messenger departed, and duly conveyed his message to the kings, who, yearning for their release, eagerly looked forward to Bhagavan Sri Krishna's appearance on the spot. Passing through the lands of Anarta, Sauvira, Maru, and Kurukshetra, and crossing many hills and rivers, Bhagavan Sri Krishna went past many towns, villages, cowherds, hamlets, mines, and quarries. Then, crossing the Drashadvati and Sarasvati rivers, he passed through the kingdoms of Panchala and Matsya, and finally reached Indraprastha. Parikshit, the sight of Sri Krishna is a rare boon. Raja Yudhishthira was delighted to hear the news of his arrival and marched out of the city with his priests, friends, and relations. Amidst the singing of auspicious songs, sounds of trumpets and other musical instruments, and loud recitation of the Vedas by Brahmanas, Yudhishthira went forth with great zeal to receive the Lord, just as the senses begin to function as soon as the life breath returns. At the sight of Sri Krishna, whom he had seen after a long time, the heart of Yudhishthira overflowed with emotion, and he embraced the Lord, his most beloved friend, again and again. Encircling with his arms the person of Sri Krishna, the sacred abode of Lakshmi, the Raja was rid of all evils and felt extremely delighted. With tears in his eyes and hair standing on end, he forgot all about this delusive world. Bhima, too, was transported with joy when he embraced his dear cousin with a broad smile on his lips, and his heart overflowed with an outburst of emotion. Similarly, Arjuna and the twins, Nakula and Sahadeva, with profuse tears of joy, embraced the immortal Lord, their best friend and well-wisher. Embraced by Arjuna for a second time, and hailed by Nakula and Sahadeva, Sri Krishna himself bowed to the Brahmanas and the elder among the Kurus in the order of their age and seniority. Honored by the Kurus, Srinjayas, and Kaikayas, the Lord also duly returned them honors. Sutas, Magadhas, Gandharvas, bards, and court jesters sang and danced to the accompaniment of musical instruments such as mridangas, conches, tabors, lutes, drums, and trumpets, and the Brahmanas uttered their praises. Thus surrounded by friends and well-wishers, the blessed Lord, the foremost among those of sacred renown, entered the decorated city of Indraprastha amidst the praises and acclamations of the people. The roads of the city of Indraprastha were sprinkled with the juice flowing from the temples of elephants in Rut, as well as scented water. Wonderful many-colored flags flapped. Temporary arches of gold were erected, and gold pots filled with water were placed at the entrance of houses. Having washed and scented themselves, and putting on new garments, ornaments, and garlands, the citizens, men and women, came out of their houses and crowded the streets. Lights were kindled and offerings of flowers made in front of all houses, and scented fumes escaped from the lattices of their windows, presenting an agreeable sight. The houses were decorated with buntings and domes of gold with silver bases adorned every housetop. Bhagavan Sri Krishna observed this beauty of the Kaurava capital as he proceeded through its streets. So the reason, despite this being the Pandava capital, that it's called the Kaurava capital is that technically the Pandavas are Kauravas. They're all in the clan of Kuru. The ones who claim the title of the throne of the Kurus are called the Kauravas, Duryodhana, and so on, who dwell in Hastinapura. But technically, the Pandavas are also Kauravas, hence here referring to their city as the Kaurava capital. On hearing of his arrival, damsels hurriedly came out into the streets to see the one attraction of all human eye, abandoning their household works and leaving their respective husbands in their beds. As they came out in haste, the pleats of their hair and the knots of their dress got loosened on account of their ardent desire to see him. The roads were crowded with elephants, horses, chariots, and pedestrians. The women, therefore, saw Sri Krishna and his consorts from the tops of their houses, showered flowers on him, and mentally embracing him, greeted him with smiling looks. Seeing the consorts of Sri Krishna accompanying their husband on the road, even as the stars surround the moon, the women said to themselves, "We wonder what meritorious deeds were performed by these ladies, whereby the best of persons, Sri Krishna, constantly delights their eyes with his winsome smiles and sportful glances." Here and there, prominent and sinless citizens and leaders of trade guilds met him with auspicious articles in their hands and offered him worship. Welcomed by the women of the palace with eyes blooming with joy and excited with emotion, Bhagavan Sri Krishna entered the Raja's palace. When Kunti saw her brother's son, Sri Krishna, the Lord of the three worlds, her heart was filled with delight. Rising from her couch along with her daughter-in-law Draupadi, she gave him a hearty embrace. Raja Yudhishthira was beside himself with joy on having brought Sri Krishna, the supreme ruler of the gods, within his palace, and full of reverence did not know how to proceed with his worship. Sri Krishna bowed to his aunt and other elderly women, and was in his turn saluted by Draupadi and his sister Subhadra, O Raja. She lives here because she married Arjuna. Under the direction of her mother-in-law, Draupadi honored Rukmini, Satyabhama, Bhadra, Jambavati, Kalindi, Mitravinda, Lakshmana, the devoted Satya, and other consorts of Sri Krishna who had accompanied them, by offering them costumes, garlands, and other articles of beauty. The virtuous Raja Yudhishthira comfortably lodged Bhagavan Sri Krishna with his army, attendants, ministers, and consorts, with elaborate arrangements for the supply of fresh articles for their use. Along with Arjuna, Sri Krishna propitiated the god of fire, Agni Deva, by offering to him the Khandava forest and rescued Mayasura, who in his turn constructed a wonderful assembly hall for the Raja. Those are huge stories on their own, which are told in the Mahabharata, and Shuka is just mentioning that those occurred around this time. Shuka is actually telling this slightly out of order. He's just briefly alluding to those other stories. In order to please Yudhishthira, the Lord spent several months at Indraprastha. There he occasionally went out with Arjuna for excursion in his chariot, followed by a number of warriors. Thus ends the 71st discourse, entitled Sri Krishna's Visit to Indraprastha, and the latter half of Book 10 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 72, Jarasandha killed. Sri Shuka began again. Parikshit, one day, Raja Yudhishthira, while seated in his court surrounded by sages, brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, his own brothers, gurus, elders of the race, clansmen, and relations, as well as his kinsmen, addressed Bhagavan Sri Krishna within their hearing. Raja Yudhishthira submitted. Govinda, through the performance of the sovereign sacrifice, Rajasuya, I intend to worship you as well as the gods who are but your part manifestations. Kindly accomplish this desire of mine, O Lord. The pair of wooden sandals you wear under your lotus-like feet destroy all evil. Those holy persons who constantly worship them, meditate on them, and extol them obtain release from the bondage of mundane existence. They get even worldly boons if they seek for them. Others, however, do not get either. O God of gods, let these men of the world directly perceive the glory of worshiping your lotus feet. Lord, kindly demonstrate to the Kuru and Srinjaya chiefs the destinies of those who worship and those who do not worship you. Lord, you are the self of all, the supreme Brahman, being of the nature of self-enjoyment and looking on all with an equal eye. The cognition of self and not self does not exist in you. Those who worship you win your favor even as persons betaking themselves to the wish-yielding kalpavriksha tree gain their object. The degree of success attained by them is commensurate with the amount of service they have put forth, and does not point to any perversity on your part. The glorious Lord said, O Raja, your resolution is excellent. Through the performance of the Rajasuya Yajna, your auspicious fame will extend to all the three worlds. This sovereign sacrifice, O Raja, is welcomed by the sages, pitris, the gods, all your friends and relations, including myself, and in fact by all beings. Conquering all the kings and bringing the world under your control, collect all necessary things and then perform the Mahayajna. O Raja, these brothers of yours are born of deities who are guardians of the world. You yourself, since his brothers are the sons of Indra, Vayu, and the Ashvinal. You yourself are a man of wisdom and self-control and have conquered me by your virtues. Those who have not controlled their mind and senses cannot win me. Even the greatest of devas in this world cannot expect to overpower my devotee by means of his energy, glory, splendor, and supernatural powers, much less any earthly being. Sri Shuka continued. Parikshit, hearing these words of the Almighty Lord, Raja Yudhishthira was extremely delighted. His face became cheerful like a fresh-blown lotus. He commissioned all his brothers to conquer the earth. Bhagavan Sri Krishna infused his energy into the Pandavas and made them unconquerable. Raja Yudhishthira sent his youngest brother Sahadeva, along with Srinjaya warriors, to conquer the southern regions. He deputed Nakula along with the Matsyas to the west, Arjuna and the Kekayas to the north, and Bhima accompanied by the Madras to the east. O Raja, conquering all the kings by dint of their prowess, these warriors brought untold riches from the various quarters to Raja Yudhishthira, who is preparing for the yajna. When Yudhishthira heard that Jarasandha remained unsubdued, he became moody and began to muse. Bhagavan Sri Krishna then laid before him the plan suggested by Uddhava, so the tradition goes. Thereupon, Bhimasena, Arjuna, and Bhagavan Sri Krishna assumed the guise of Brahmanas and went to Girivraja, the capital of Jarasandha. Raja Jarasandha was a devotee of the Brahmanas and scrupulous in the observance of the sacred duty of a householder. The three Kshatriyas, disguised as Brahmanas, went to Jarasandha's palace at the hour appointed for the entertainment of unexpected guests. There they made their request to Jarasandha as follows. O Raja, may you be blessed. Know us to be your guests come from a long distance. We have come with a definite purpose, therefore please grant us our request. O Raja, a forbearing person can bear anything. The wicked can do anything. And a generous donor will not hesitate to give away anything. And none is foreign to a man of undifferentiating outlook. If a capable man, through his mortal body, does not earn enduring fame worthy of being sung by men of virtue, he deserves to be pitied and censured. Rajas Harishchandra and Rantideva, Shibi and Bali, the sage Mudgala, the famous dove of the legend, and the fowler, and many more, attained lasting happiness through the transient body and its belongings. Sri Shuka went on. Parikshit, from their tone, appearance, and forearms bearing scars caused by the friction of bowstrings, Jarasandha came to know that the newcomers were no Brahmanas, but Kshatriyas come in the guise of Brahmanas. He had a hazy notion that he had seen them somewhere before, but he reflected, though Kshatriyas, they have taken this guise of Brahmanas. When they have gone to the length of seeking a gift from me, I shall give them, even this body, though difficult to part with. The god Vishnu, appearing in the guise of a Brahmana, deprived Bali of his lordly position, and yet the unsullied fame of Bali is sung extensively in all directions. It is true, Vishnu had assumed that diminutive form of a Brahmana in order to return the ruling authority to its rightful owner, Indra. Bali had come to know it and was opposed by Shukra, his guru, and yet he gave away the earth. This body is sure to perish one day. The Kshatriya who does not endeavor to attain extensive fame through it, and does not live for the sake of the Brahmanas alone, lives in vain. Jarasandha was a liberal-minded Raja. Reflecting thus, he said to Sri Krishna, Arjuna, and Bhimasena, disguised as Brahmanas, as follows: Brahmanas, seek whatever you desire. I'm prepared to give you everything, even my head. The glorious Lord said, O Maharaja, we are no Brahmanas seeking food from you. We have come here in search of a combat. If it pleases you, grant us the boon of a single combat with you. That is Bhima, son of Kunti. He is his younger brother Arjuna, and know me to be their cousin Krishna, your former adversary. Hearing these words of Sri Krishna, Jarasandha laughed loudly, and filled with rage said, If you seek a combat, fools, I shall certainly offer fight with you. But Krishna, I shall not fight with you. You are a coward. And rose balance of mind in battle. Afraid of me, you abandoned your city Mathura and took shelter in the sea. As for Arjuna, he is no warrior. He is junior to me in age and has no great prowess either. He is therefore no match for me. Bhima is equal in strength to me. With these words, Jarasandha gave a huge mace to Bhimasena, and himself taking up another, came out of the city. Going to the arena, these two warriors who were furious in battle closed with and struck each other with their respective maces, which were as hard as the thunderbolt. They began to move right and left, maneuvering for position with such adroitness, though they looked like two actors playing at fight on a public stage. When they hurled their maces at each other, the rattling noise resembled the clap of thunder, or the sound of impact between the tusks of two fighting tuskers, meaning two fighting elephants. Just as when two elephants burning with rage fight with each other with twigs of the sun plant, and the twigs are reduced to powder, even so the maces of the two warriors, hurled with the full force of their arms against each other's shoulders, hips, feet, hands, thighs, and collarbones, were reduced to pulp. Thus, when their maces fell broken, the two warriors, full of rage, struck each other with their fists as hard as steel. As they fought like two elephants, the blows they dealt at each other with their palms produced a sound as sharp as the clap of thunder. Parikshit, Jarasandha, and Bhimasena were equally matched so far as training, strength, and vigor were concerned, and both fought with unabated violence, yet their contest remained undecided. Though engaged in a mortal fight during the daytime, they lived together as friends during the nights. In this way, 27 days passed. Parikshit, on the 28th day, Bhima said to his cousin Sri Krishna, Krishna, I am unable to overthrow Jarasandha in a duel. Sri Krishna, who knew the secret of Jarasandha's birth and death, how the demoness Jara joined his body, which was divided into two, and conferred life on him, considered the matter, and comforting Bhimasena, infused his own strength into Bhima. Having hit upon the plan of overthrowing the enemy, Sri Krishna, whose insight was infallible, took up a twig and split it into two, by way of a signal to demonstrate to Bhimasena how to do it. The foremost warrior of enormous strength, Bhima, understood what was being conveyed to him, and taking hold of Jarasandha, when they dueled on the 28th day, by the feet, threw him on the ground. Pressing a foot of the enemy with one foot, he took hold of the other foot with both his hands, and split him into two from the anus, as a huge elephant splits up a twig. The people saw the two halves of Jarasandha's person, each with one foot, one thigh, one testicle, one hip, half the back and one breast, one shoulder, one arm, one eye, one eyebrow, and one ear. Great was the outcry among his subjects when Jarasandha, the Raja of Magadha, fell. Bhagavan Sri Krishna and Arjuna greeted Bhimasena by embracing him. The Almighty Lord, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, is the life-giver of all creatures. No one can fathom his greatness. Having installed Jarasandha's son, Sahadeva, on the throne of Magadha, he set at liberty all the kings who had been imprisoned by Jarasandha. Jarasandha's son Sahadeva is of no relation to the Pandava Sahadeva. two people with the same name. Thus ends the 72nd discourse entitled Jarasandha Killed, and the latter half of Book 10 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 73. Sri Krishna and others return to Indraprastha. Sri Shuka began again. Parikshit, Jarasandha had subdued in battle without much effort 20,800 Kshatriya princes, and had confined them in a place surrounded by mountains on all sides. Released by Bhagavan Sri Krishna, they came out of their captivity with unclean bodies and dirty clothes. They had been emaciated with hunger, and their faces were lank. The long confinement had considerably reduced their weight. Coming out of the prison, they saw Lord Sri Krishna standing before them, having a complexion dark as the cloud, clad in yellow silken robes and possessed of 4 arms, holding a lotus in one hand and wielding the mace, conch, and discus with the others, bearing the mark of Srivatsa on his breast, with eyes reddish like the interior of a lotus, with a lovely and cheerful face, adorned with glowing earrings shaped like the crocodile, and decked with a crown, a necklace of pearls, bracelets, and a girdle, and a pair of armlets, the jewel Kaustubha shining on his neck, and a garland of silken flowers hanging on his breast. The sight of the Lord kept them spellbound. They seemed to drink him with the eyes, lick him with their tongues, inhale him with their nose, and embrace him with their arms. All their sins were washed away at his very sight. They bowed to the Lord, touching his blessed feet with their heads. The joy derived through Bhagavan Sri Krishna's darshana removed the languor caused by their confinement. With joined palms, they offered their praises to the Lord in the following words. The kings prayed, O God of gods, remover of the distress of those who take refuge in you, O imperishable Lord, we offer our salutations to you. Disgusted with the bitter experience of this fearful scourge of transmigration, we seek refuge in you. Pray protect us. Krishna, we have no grudge against Jarasandha. In fact, it was through your grace that we were deprived of our kingdoms. Puffed up with the pride of sovereignty and power, a king is generally deprived of true happiness. For deluded by your Maya, he comes to regard worldly fortune as permanent. Just as the ignorant take the mirage for a sheet of water, even so the unwise attached to the senses regard the ever-changing Maya as reality. Lord, blinded by the intoxication with wealth and power, at one time we vied with one another in our lust for conquering the world, and mercilessly brought about the destruction of our own people in pursuing our mad projects. We were so arrogant that we took no notice of you standing before us as death itself. Krishna, mysterious are the ways of time. Its potency is unfathomable, for it is one of your many forms. It has deprived us of our fortune, and our pride has been shattered through your grace. We now contemplate on your sacred feet. Lord, we no longer seek the boon of sovereignty enjoyable through this ever-decaying body, the nursery of ailments. We have realized that the pleasures of sovereignty are like a mirage, nor do we crave for the posthumous enjoyments of svarga, which sounds attractive only to the ear. Pray tell us now the means whereby we may constantly remember your lotus-like feet, even though we may have to undergo a series of births. Krishna, you have descended on this earth through the agency of Vasudeva. You destroy the sins of those who come in contact with you and bring them deliverance. You are the supreme spirit. You exterminate the sufferings of those who bend low before you. O Govinda, the protector of cows, we offer our obeisances to you. Sri Shuka resumed, Parikshit, when the kings now released from captivity praised in those words the merciful Lord, who affords shelter to those who seek it, he replied to them in sweet accents as below. Bhagavan Sri Krishna said, As desired by you, O Rajas, you will henceforth entertain unwavering devotion to me, the universal Lord, who am the very self of all. You deserve congratulation, O kings, for your resolution. What you say is certainly true, for I have seen that excess of pride, of wealth and power makes people mad. Haihaya, Nahusha, Vena, Ravana, Narakasura, and many other gods, demons, and kings fell from their position through the intoxication of wealth and power. Know that the body and everything connected with it is perishable, inasmuch as it is subject to birth, and by implication, death. Therefore, do not get attached to them. Carefully controlling your mind and senses, worship me through yajnas and protect your subjects in the righteous way. Beget children for the continuity of the family line, and not for enjoyment, and accepting with an equable mind as a boon from me whatever experiences come to your lot in the shape of birth and death, pleasure and pain, gain and loss, etc. Live in the world with your mind devoted to me. Remain indifferent to the body and everything connected therewith. Take delight in the self, practice bhajana, and observe religious vows. Thus, fixing your mind steadily on me, you will in the end attain to me, the Supreme Spirit. Sri Shuka went on. Parikshit, thus instructing the kings, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the Almighty Lord of the universe, detailed a number of attendants, men and women, to give them a bath. He then got Sahadeva, son of Jarasandha, to honor the kings by offering them wearing apparel, ornaments, garlands, sandal paste, and other things worthy of royal use. After they had finished their bath and adorned themselves, they were entertained with excellent dishes and other luxuries, such as betel leaves, etc., worthy of kings. Thus treated with due honor by Bhagavan Sri Krishna and rid of their suffering, the kings shone with their brilliant earrings, like the planets at the end of the rainy season, which refers to at the end of the monsoon season, the night sky is very clear, and so the planets are seen shining much brighter than during the rainy season when it's often cloudy or hazy. The Lord then provided them all with chariots adorned with jewels and gold and drawn by good horses, cheered them with sweet words, and sent them away to their respective territories. Thus delivered from their calamity by the high-souled Sri Krishna, the kings left for their capitals, contemplating on the Lord, his virtues, and noble deeds. Reaching their kingdoms, they related to their subjects the benevolent doings of the Supreme Person, and diligently followed his injunctions in their daily lives. Parikshit, thus having Jarasandha killed by Bhimasena, and being duly honored by Jarasandha's son, Sahadeva, Sri Krishna, accompanied by Bhima and Arjuna, departed for Indraprastha. On reaching the outskirts of the city, the three victorious heroes blew their respective conches, bringing joy to their friends and sorrow to their enemies. The people of Indraprastha were extremely delighted at heart to hear the sound and concluded at once that Jarasandha had been killed and that Raja Yudhishthira had well nigh achieved his object. There, Bhimasena, Arjuna, and Sri Krishna bowed to Raja Yudhishthira and related to him all that they had done. Overwhelmed with emotion at the exceptional favor shown to him by Bhagavan Sri Krishna, Raja Yudhishthira shed tears of joy and could not speak a word. Thus ends the 73rd discourse bearing on the return of Sri Krishna and others in the latter half of Book 10 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. Discourse 74, Shishupala killed. Sri Shuka began again. Parikshit, Yudhishthira was highly delighted to hear of Jarasandha's fall and of the supreme glory of Bhagavan Sri Krishna, and spoke to him as follows. Raja Yudhishthira submitted, Krishna, lords of the three worlds like Brahma and Shankara, and guardians of the world like Indra, bow their heads to your command whenever they obtain the rare privilege of receiving it. O infinite Lord, though extremely humble and wretched, we are conceited enough to regard ourselves as kings and rulers. Yet you submit to our authority and carry out our commands. O lotus-eyed Lord, this is nothing but imitation on your part of the ways of men. Just as the brilliance of the sun is neither enhanced nor suffers diminution with the ascent or decline of the sun, in other words, that the ascent or decline of the sun is seen from our perspective on Earth, but it has no effect on the sun itself. Even so, your doings in no way exalt you or detract from your glory, for you are the Supreme Spirit, the one absolute without a second. O unconquerable Lord, thoughts of diversity like I and mine and thou and thine obtain only among the ignorant. Such crooked notions of difference do not find place even in your devotees, much less in you. Whatever you do is therefore nothing but your Leela. Sri Shuka resumed. Saying so, and with Bhagavan Sri Krishna's concurrence, Raja Yudhishthira invited at an hour propitious for the yajna, Brahmanas versed in the Vedas and proficient in the Vedic ritual to officiate as priests at the sacrifice. They were, the priests were, Sri Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa was the head priest of the whole thing, Bharadvaja, Sumantu, Gautama, Asita, Vasishta, Chyavana, Kanva, Maitreya, Kavasha, Trita, Vishvamitra, Vamadeva, Sumati, Jaimini, Kratu, Paila, Parashara, Garga, and Vaishampayana, Atharva, Kashyapa, Dhaumya, Parashurama, Shukracharya, Asuri, Vitihotra, Madhuchanda, Virasena, and Akratavrana. Besides these, he also invited Dronacharya, Bhishma, Kripacharya, and others. These are not priests, but royal guests. Dhritarashtra with all his sons, and the noble-minded Vidura to come and help in the performance. In order to witness the Mahayagna, many princes with their ministers and chief officers, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, arrived at Indraprastha, O Raja. Then the priests plowed the sacrificial ground with plows of gold and initiated Yudhishthira according to the scriptural injunctions as the Yajamana. The utensils used in this yagna were all made of gold, as they were in the yagna performed by Varuna in ancient times, by which he became, Varuna performed a famous ancient Rajasuya, by which he became a great Raja of the Asuras in Patala Loka, and gained the undersea golden city of Vibhavari. Brahma, Shankara, Indra, and other guardians of the world, Siddhas and Gandharvas with their retinues, Vidyadharas and Nagas, sages, Yakshas, and Rakshasas, birds, Kinnaras, Charanas, and powerful princes with their queens all came to attend the Rajasuya Yagna of Raja Yudhishthira at his invitation. All of them admitted without any hesitation that he was qualified to perform the yagna. For to a devotee of Sri Krishna, nothing is impossible of achievement. Then the priests, who were as glorious as the gods, conducted for the Raja Suya Yagna, according to the scriptural ordinance, as in ancient times the gods did for Varuna. On the day fixed for extracting the Soma juice, the Raja honored the blessed priests as well as the supervisors of the performance with due attention. Now, the members of the assembly proceeded to consider who was worthy of receiving the first place of honor, but could not come to any decision for want of unanimity. Thereupon Sahadeva addressed the assembly in the following words, and this is Sahadeva the Pandava, not Sahadeva, son of Jarasandha. In my opinion, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the crown jewel of the Yadus, is the best man in this assembly and deserves the first place of honor. For all the gods, as well as time, space, wealth, and whatever other things there are in this world, all are but he. The whole universe is his manifestation. The sacrifices are he. He is fire, he is the oblations, he is revealed in the form of the mantras. The path of knowledge and the path of action both lead to him. Members of this august assembly, Bhagavan Sri Krishna is the one absolute without a second. The whole universe is his body. Though self-dependent and unborn, he creates, protects, and destroys the universe by his own will. Through his grace, people perform various acts in the world and pursue the fourfold objects of life, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Therefore, I propose that foremost honor should be offered to Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the greatest of the great. Through honoring him, we shall have honored all beings, as well as our own self. He who seeks that his gifts should embrace infinity should make them to Sri Krishna, who is the self of all beings and views none as other than himself, who is absolutely unruffled and perfect in every way. Parikshit, Sahadeva, who was aware of Bhagavan Sri Krishna's greatness, became silent after saying this. All good people in the assembly, which was to say not all people in the assembly, were pleased to hear this and applauded him, saying, well said, well said. Hearing this ejaculation of the Brahmanas and ascertaining the general sense of the members of the assembly, since there was a majority agreement, Raja Yudhishthira was extremely delighted, and with a heart overwhelmed with emotion, honored Sri Krishna by offering him the worship due to the first man in the assembly. In great joy, he washed the feet of Sri Krishna, and together with his consort Draupadi, brothers, ministers, and other members of his family, bore on his head the drops of that water, which purify the world. Then he presented the Lord with robes of yellow silk and ornaments. His eyes being full of tears at the time, he could not even distinctly see the form of the Lord. Seeing him thus honored, all those present at the assembly joined their palms in reverence, with shouts of Namo Namaha and Jaya Jaya, and showers of flowers fell on him from the heavens. Parikshit, Shishupala heard all this from his seat in the assembly. He was the one who was originally going to marry Rukmini. Enraged at the glorification of Sri Krishna, He rose from his seat and, holding up his arm in great indignation, fearlessly spoke these harsh words with reference to Sri Krishna. He said, "Leaders of this house, the pronouncement of the Vedas that time is God is quite true, for time is inviolable. Its decree cannot be revoked. We have seen how even the reason of wise and elderly people can be misled by the prattlings of children. Remember, you are the best judge to decide who is worthy to receive the honor of first place in this assembly. Therefore, please do not accept as gospel truth Sahadeva's childish talk that Krishna is worthy of that honor. There are present here men of great austerity, learning, and sacred vows, men who have wiped out their sins through wisdom, great sages who are established in Brahman and adored even by the greatest of gods. Ignoring the leaders of this assembly, how can this cowherd, a disgrace to his clan and family, be considered worthy of receiving this honor? Does the crow deserve to receive a sacrificial oblation? He owns no varna or ashrama and does not possess nobility of birth. He is beyond the pale of all dharmas and acts wantonly both against the Vedic injunctions and established usage. Moreover, he is devoid of all virtues. Under the circumstances, how can he deserve the honor of first place? You are aware that his clan is under the curse of Yayati and has therefore been boycotted by all good people. Moreover, they are all given to unauthorized drinking. How can he therefore be entitled to receive the honor of first place? Abandoning Mathura and other sacred places, they have resorted to a fortified place in the sea, destitute of Brahmanas devoted to the Vedas. When they come out of their fortifications, they harass all creatures like pirates. Parikshit, all the merits of Shishupala, all his positive karma, had been exhausted. That is why he uttered these and similar harsh words with reference to Sri Krishna. But just as the lion does not heed the jackal's howls, even so the Almighty Lord did not say a word in reply to Shishupala. But the vilification of the Lord became unbearable to the audience, some of whom closed their ears and indignantly left the hall, censuring Shishupala for his unjustifiable remarks. For Parikshit, he who on hearing aspersions cast upon God or upon his devotee does not leave the spot, loses his merit and goes down to Naraka. Now the Pandavas, Matsyas, Kaikayas, and Suranjayas stood up in rage with uplifted weapons, determined to make short work of Shishupala. Undaunted by the threat, the latter, Shishupala, took up his sword and shield and rebuked the princes who sided with Sri Krishna in the assembly. Bhagavan Sri Krishna stood up and pacified the rulers who sided with him, and exhibiting some anger, cut off with his sharp-edged discus the head of Shishupala, who had in the meantime swooped upon him. Great and tumultuous was the uproar in the assembly when Shishupala fell down dead. The princes who followed him took to their heels to save their lives, worried that Krishna would attack them next. Just as a meteor dropping from the sky gets absorbed into the earth, even so all people witnessed a column of light emanating from Shishupala's body, enter Sri Krishna and merge into him. Parikshit, contemplating on the Lord with thoughts of hatred and anger fostered for 3 consecutive lives, Shishupala became one with him and was restored to his original place as an attendant of the Lord. Since, remember, Shishupala was the 3rd and final incarnation taken by one of the doorkeepers of Vaikuntha who were cursed to have to live 3 lives as an enemy of the Lord. There were Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, Ravana and Kumbhakarna, and now Shishupala and Dantavaktra. We haven't heard very much about Dantavaktra yet, but he will be coming up shortly. Thus it is the thought of the individual which determines his future state. After Shishupala's deliverance, Emperor Yudhishthira gave sacrificial fees on a liberal scale to the priests and supervisors of the yajna and honored all who attended it. Thereafter, he performed ablutions betokening the completion of the yajna according to the scriptural injunctions. Parikshit, having thus brought the Raja Suya Yajna of Yudhishthira to a successful conclusion, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the Supreme Lord of all masters of yoga, spent some more months at Indraprastha at the request of his friends and relations. Then the Almighty Lord took leave of Yudhishthira, who was reluctant to allow him to go, and left for Dwaraka with his consorts and ministers, since they had at this point been away from home for almost a year. Parikshit, I have already narrated to you at considerable length how under the curse of Sanaka and his brothers Jaya and Vijaya, the 2 attendants of the Lord of Vaikuntha, had to take repeated births on earth. Having finished the ablutions at the close of the Raja Suya Yajna, Yudhishthira shone like Indra, the Raja of Devas, in the assembly of Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. Honored by Yudhishthira, all the gods, men, and ethereal beings gladly returned to their respective abodes, glorifying Bhagavan Sri Krishna and the yajna performed by Raja Yudhishthira. Duryodhana alone, of all those who had attended the yajna, could not bear the sight of the vast fortune and royal splendor of the Pandavas, for he was sinful and quarrelsome by nature, a veritable cancer in the body of the Kuru race, brought into being for its destruction. Parikshit, anyone who sings of this Leela of Bhagavan Sri Krishna relating to the destruction of Shishupala and Jarasandha, the release of the imprisoned kings, and performance of the Raja Suya Yajna by Yudhishthira, will be freed of all sin. Thus ends the 74th discourse entitled Shishupala Killed, in the latter half of Book 10 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. I think we can get in one more since it kind of finishes, it's kind of a little postscript to this story. Discourse 75, Duryodhana's humiliation. The Raja submitted, Holy Sage, you told me just now that all the Rajas, sages, and gods who had assembled there rejoiced at the grand success of the Raja Suya Yajna performed by Yudhishthira, and that Duryodhana was the only exception in this matter. O worshipful one, please tell me the reason of this. Sri Shuka replied, Parikshit, your grandfather Yudhishthira was a great soul, a Mahatma. Bound to him with ties of affection, all his relations took upon themselves some form of service or other during the yajna. Bhima was placed in charge of the kitchen, Duryodhana was master of the treasury, Sahadeva was entrusted with the duty of honoring the guests, while Nakula had the charge of procuring supplies. It was a deliberate jab at Duryodhana that they made him master of the treasury, because they were deliberately showing off their wealth to him, knowing that he would be jealous. Arjuna waited upon the elders, and Sri Krishna took upon himself the duty of washing the feet of the guests. Being master of the treasury in the context of a Rajasuya Yajna means that Duryodhana is responsible for receiving gifts from everybody and seeing that it is put into the Pandavas' treasury. So it's like deliberately meant to enrage him over the hours of him doing this work. Draupadi attended to the work of serving food, while the magnanimous Karna was entrusted with the duty of bestowing gifts. Similarly, Satyaki, Vikarna, Hardikya, Vidura, Bhurishrava, and the other sons of Bhahlika, Santardana, and others were entrusted with one duty or another. All of them endeavored to perform their respective duties to the satisfaction of Yudhishthira. Parikshit, after the priests and supervisors of the yajna, men of learning, friends, and relations had been duly honored with sweet words, rich presents, and sacrificial fees, and Shishupala had entered the feet of the Lord, meaning died and rejoined with the Lord, Yudhishthira went to the Ganga to perform the concluding ablutions. While the ceremony was being so performed, various instruments of music like the mridanga, conch drum, kettle drum, tabor, and trumpet were played upon. The courtesans danced in great joy, the songsters sang in batches. The sound of the veena, flute, and cymbals reached the heavens. Adorned with necklaces of gold, the Yadava, Sranjaya, Kamboja, Kuru, Kekaya, and Koshala kings, with flags of various colors waving in the air, followed Yudhishthira to the Ganga, shaking the earth with their armies consisting of fully accoutered foot soldiers, elephants, chariots, and horses. Supervisors of the yajna, priests, and learned brahmanas proceeded, chanting the Vedic hymns in loud intonations. The gods, rishis, pitris, and gandharvas showered flowers on the procession from the heavens and sang Yudhishthira's praises. Men and women of the city, adorned with scents, garlands, beautiful clothes, and ornaments, came out on the public roads and sported on, smearing and sprinkling one another with liquids of various kinds. The courtesans smeared the men with oil, milk, butter, scented water, turmeric powder, saffron paste, and were themselves smeared all over by the men in return. It was thus that they amused themselves. Just as celestial ladies thronged in the sky in their beautiful aerial vimanas to see this festivity on earth, so the ladies of the royal house of Indraprastha, curious to have a look at the grand procession, came out, guarded by foot soldiers. Bhagavan Sri Krishna, together with his companions, sprinkled water of various colors on them, which made their faces bloom in bashful smiles, thus heightening their beauty. Sprinkled with water, the clothes of the queens got wet, so that their limbs, including their breasts, thighs, and hips, could be seen through. They also took up syringes filled with colored water, like big pumps, like big pump action squirt guns, essentially, and threw jets of water on their brothers-in-law and on their friends. In the flurry of the moment, their braids got loosened and flowers dropped therefrom. Parikshit, the sight of this lovely and innocent play on their part brought impious thoughts in the mind of people possessed of impure hearts. Seated in his chariot, drawn by the best horses and decked with gold necklaces, Emperor Yudhishthira, with Draupadi and other consorts, looked as if the great sacrifice Raja Suya with the attendant rituals had assumed human forms. After the ritual, known by the name Patni Sanjaya, and the rites connected with the concluding ablutions had been over, the Raja performed Atamana, sipped water from the palm of his hand, and as directed by priests, bathed in the Ganga, together with Draupadi. At that time, the drums of celestials sounded in the heavens, joined with the sounding of drums by men, and the gods, rishis, pitris, and men showered flowers. After the emperor had finished his ablutions, people belonging to all castes and stages of life took their dips in the Ganga, for a bath at that time rids even the most sinful of their sins forthwith. Then Yudhishthira put a piece of new silk cloth round his loins and another round his shoulders, and adorning himself with ornaments, he honored the priests and supervisors of the yajna as well as other brahmanas with gifts of cloth, and honored all his relations and kinsmen, brother princes, friends and well-wishers, and other ordinary folk again and again. Wearing jeweled earrings, garlands of flowers, turbans, long coats, pieces of silk, and costly necklaces of pearls, all these people looked like gods come down on earth. And the women looked exceptionally charming with the beauty of their faces enhanced by their earrings and their overhanging locks, and with the zones of gold lying round their hips. Parikshit, all those who had assembled there, priests of high character, supervisors of the yajna well-versed in the Vedas, brahmanas, kshatriyas, vaishyas, and shudras, princes, gods, rishis, pitris, and members of other classes of beings, Indra and the other protectors of the world with their attendants, now took leave of Yudhishthira and returned to their respective abodes, receiving appropriate honors from the emperor. Just as a mortal would never feel satisfied with a drink of nectar, so they did not get tired of praising the grand success of the Raja Suya Yajna performed by the saintly Raja Yudhishthira, who was a great devotee of God. The emperor lovingly detained his kinsmen, friends, and relations, and also Bhagavan Sri Krishna at his capital, for he could not even bear the idea of their separation. Sending away Samba, his other sons, as well as the principal Yadava warriors to Dvaraka, the Almighty Lord stayed there at Indraprastha with a view to pleasing the Raja. As we were told, for several more months he stayed. Thus, having realized with the help of Sri Krishna the long-cherished ambition of performing the Raja Suya Yajna, which was as difficult to realize as it is to cross the ocean, Yudhishthira now heaved a sigh of relief. On a certain day, Duryodhana felt greatly troubled at heart at the sight of Yudhishthira's splendor in his palace, and the greatness attained by him, a great devotee of God, through the performance of the Raja Suya Yajna. The palace contained all the wealth and royal splendors of earthly monarchs. Asura Rajas and lords of celestials got together by the demon Maya who had built it. Queen Draupadi waited upon her consorts with all these materials, and it was mainly due to his attachment for her that Duryodhana was filled with jealousy. More than 1,000 consorts of Bhagavan Sri Krishna lived in that palace at the time. The anklets at their feet charmingly jingled when they walked with slow paces on account of their bulky hips. They were slender-waisted, and the saffron on their breast made their white necklace of pearls appear red. Rocking earrings and flowing locks enhanced the beauty of their faces. In a part of the hall constructed by Mayasura, Emperor Yudhishthira, invested with imperial glory, was once seated on a throne of gold. Surrounded by his brother and kinsmen and his guide, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, and extolled by bards, he looked like Indra. Proud Duryodhana, accompanied by his brothers, appeared there, sword in hand, with a crown on his head and a necklace hanging on his breast. He angrily scolded the guards at the gate as he entered. Deluded by the superb skill of Maya, he drew up his skirts, mistaking a certain part of the floor for a sheet of water, but it was just dry floor. And proceeding further, he stumbled into water, mistaking it for the bare floor. Dear Parikshit, Bhima, the royal ladies, and other princes laughed when they saw him fall in the pool, notwithstanding Yudhishthira's remonstrances, being encouraged by a gesture from Sri Krishna that it would be diplomatically wise for him to tell people not to laugh at Duryodhana. Duryodhana was abashed at this discomfiture. Burning with rage and with his face cast down, he silently left the hall and immediately departed for Hastinapura, his own city. The incident raised a cry of dismay from all good people, and Yudhishthira felt perturbed over it, as it were. Bhagavan Sri Krishna, however, kept quiet over the incident, intent as he was upon relieving the burden of the earth. In fact, it was his enchanting look which threw Duryodhana into confusion and brought about the incident. Parikshit, you asked me on this occasion how at the great Rajasuya Yajna Duryodhana developed his intense ill will against the Pandavas. I have told you the secret of it. Thus ends the 75th discourse entitled Duryodhana's Humiliation. In the latter half of Book 10 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Samhita. And we can end there for today. That's the end of that whole cycle of the story. And the next discourse starts a new one. Yeah, thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you, Devla. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.